Welcome, everyone. It's 6 o'clock in the UK, so we're going to start another Equal Experts talk online. I'm Erin O'Connor. I'm a delivery lead or Scrum Master at Equal Experts. And tonight we're welcoming two speakers who I've been lucky enough to have worked with and learned from. They are Simon Skelton and Steve Smith. Just a little intro on both of these guys. Simon is the platform and operations manager at John Lewis Partners, and he's got overall accountability for the smooth running of the johnlewis.com website. And he considers himself a new boy with a mere 20 years at the partnership. And throughout his career, he's been an on-call programmer, a developer. He's led ops teams and implemented ITIL across the partnership. But he's definitely an advocate for DevOps. And then Steve is a principal consultant at Equal Experts. He advises clients on digital transformation, continuous delivery, and operability. Steve was a leader on a 60-team, 600 microservices program for a UK government department with 500 billion per annum revenue. He also worked with Simon to implement a continuous delivery and operability strategy for the John Lewis digital platform. Steve is also an author of multiple books, witty tweets, and insightful blogs. Read them. Welcome, both of you and everyone else. So what we're going to talk about tonight is Simon and Steve are going to be sharing successes that they've had and the lessons they've learned while adopting operability at scale at John Lewis. I think your talk is going to be around 40 minutes.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And then after we go through the presentation, we'll have time for questions and answers. And then just a little bit about the Q&A is there's a little module, I think it's at the bottom of the screen, says Q&A, and you can put your questions right in there. There's also a chat, but please don't put the questions in the chat, put them in the Q&A. And you'll be able to vote up your favorite questions. So we'll take the most popular ones at the end of the talk. I think it's over to you guys now. Should we start?
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you for that fantastic intro, Erin. So we're here to talk about really how we went from 10 releases a year to 5,000 deployments a year, and we also improved website stability at the same time. But worth setting a bit of context about John Lewis for those that don't know us. This definitely isn't John Lewis, but this is the classic Are You Being Served sitcom from the 70s and 80s. But actually, our history goes back much further than that. So our heritage dates back to 1864 when John Lewis Sr. opened the first store in Oxford Street. But it was actually his son, John Speeden Lewis, who believed in fairness and humanity, and he experimented with a completely new business model, as he thought it was unfair that the three owners earned far more than the 300 employees in total. And actually, way back in 1920, he shared the first bonus with all those employees of 7 weeks' pay.
Wow.
This now means 78,000 employees, or partners as we call them, were all co-owners of this business. So you see in the middle, the John Lewis Partnership is the overarching brand. I'm sure many of you know. We have John Lewis and Partners, which is our department stores, which we'll be talking about today. And we have Waitrose and Partners, our grocery supermarket chain. But overall, you know, we've got strong foundations here that have allowed us to adapt and innovate. You'll see in top right, one of my favorite characters, Edgar the Dragon from our first combined JL and Waitrose Christmas advert. And they often call it the official start of Christmas. And it was trending on UK Twitter within 2 minutes from launch and had 36 million views in the first week. And at the bottom there, you'll see our stores have had to continue to be updated to meet the ever-changing customer needs, with much more focus now on experiences. And indeed, they've had to change. Looking back at 2019, it was a very challenging year. British Retail Consortium called it the worst year on record. They didn't see coronavirus coming, obviously. We've lost, you know, really iconic brands like Mothercare in 2019. Do you remember Brexit? That used to fill the headlines, not now. And obviously in 2020, big brands going into administration such as Debenhams and House of Fraser. And if you look there, in total, almost 10,000 stores have closed in the last year, which is huge. So let's talk about some good news instead of all that doom and gloom. And here's a great example of how we've quickly adapted. So our virtual services launched just 2 weeks after the first lockdown forced our shops to close. We had virtual nursery, personal styling, home design, beauty classes, all proving really, really popular, and something that will continue past coronavirus, we believe. And coronavirus has certainly also accelerated what we'll believe will be a permanent shift more online. JohnLewis.com was already very successful at about 40% of total sales, but this is likely now to remain at 60 to 70%, we believe. And looking at last Black Friday, of course, the shops were closed at that point. We normally see kind of 10 times more than an average day on a Black Friday, but obviously with the shops closed, we estimated for an additional 50% increase in sales. And in fact, if you look at that chart, we were almost bang on with that estimate. But what's more important is that I'm pleased to say after 3 years of investment, that paid off. The platform scaled perfectly throughout Black Friday and the whole of the Christmas period, and we traded without any issues. But let's jump back in time now to 2017, which we had a number of critical decisions to make on our journey. So in 2017, we felt our speed to market for new features was too slow. The technology was seen as constraining and not enabling the business. It was also difficult to manually scale on-premise servers for the likes of Black Friday, as well as difficult to add more teams to work simultaneously delivering new features. We're also at a key decision point. Do we invest the majority of our budget and resources for the next 18 months to upgrade our commercial off-the-shelf package, e-commerce package, which would actually just at the end of it, keep us in support without adding any new features that we wanted? No surprise for guessing that's not what we chose. But in 2017, the kind of challenges we had, well, we had actually multiple e-commerce monoliths, as we're calling it, as well as the third-party commercial off-the-shelf e-commerce package. We'd also created a headless e-commerce website, but we'd actually created some new bespoke monoliths for our browse and checkout front ends. And these were all hosted on 2 on-premise data centers. We had 6 development teams, all working on top of each other in the same code repositories. All of this was supported by a central operations team called Online App Ops, mostly comprised of a third-party managed service with a few of us partners alongside them. We only managed to achieve 1 overnight deploy a month, except for summer clearance and Christmas, where we had change freezes. So that equated to only 10 deploys in a full year. And these were big releases, and they caused plenty of major incidents. And it was difficult to diagnose if anything had gone wrong with so much code being released in one go. And obviously, with a big release like that, it also took multiple hours to back out. So our time to repair was really slow. And we had a lot of rework. Our developers had to keep going back to fix defects. As a result, we believe we were losing millions of pounds in lost opportunity costs because we couldn't release new features fast enough, and because we were losing customers if they couldn't complete their transactions. So, looking over that period, what did we do to tackle those challenges? Well, this is a timeline and a very brief narrative of a huge amount of work by a lot of people, and we can't cover everything today, and we'll just cover some of the key points. So late in 2017, we made a commitment to replace our e-commerce monolith with digital services, while still delivering new features to customers. Those services will run on what we call the John Lewis Digital Platform, JLDP. It provides a paved road and is a bespoke platform with capabilities that are built on top of the Google Cloud platform. This allows us to scale up product teams without compromising on throughput, quality, or reliability. By Black Friday in 2018, our cloud search team was successfully taking 1% of all live traffic in their new service. And that validated not only the technology, but the ways of working as well. By 2019, we'd accelerated with 9 times as many teams. And we had those product teams on call for 100% of their own live traffic for their services, and new customer propositions emerging at that time. Then again, on to 2020, we continued to grow and accelerate, moving significant traffic away from our monoliths to the new services. And as you saw, that allowed record levels of Black Friday traffic. So back in 2017, we wanted to achieve a step change in deployments and reliability. And we believe that product teams and you build it, you run it are prerequisites for daily deployments. But in the early 2000s, we actually had combined delivery and ops teams. Some would call them DevOps teams. But they were eventually split out as delivery deadlines were frequently missed, as operational issues became overwhelming for those teams. But what were the issues back then and what could we learn from them? Well, back then we had project-based delivery with infrequent business owner input. We now have agile product teams with frequent prioritization from a product owner. We had manual testing, which didn't catch enough defects. We now have automated testing with continuous integration. Releases were infrequent, large and manual. We now have continuous delivery with small, frequent deployments. On-premise test and live environments were too different and too slow to provision. We now have our John Lewis digital platform for cloud-based self-service infrastructure. But when it came to operability, keeping high availability and operational issues low, the question I kept asking myself and Steve was, how do you embed operability into a digital teams at scale in an organization that's 150 years old? So at John Lewis and Partners, we think of DevOps and breaking it down into continuous delivery and operability. It's sometimes hard to encourage developers to care about operability if an operation team takes all the pain for them. At JL, we know we needed daily deployments, which meant those old ways of working just weren't going to work for us. So we needed a whole new way of working across product, delivery, and operations. So we brought operability down into these 4 areas. So growing awareness by making product teams responsible for supporting live services, identifying concerns by standardizing and then visualizing leading and trailing indicators, and then testing proficiency with the likes of running chaos days and live load tests, and embedding principles by creating new learning pathways and opportunities for partners. And now I'll hand over to Steve to give you a little more detail on some of those.
Thanks, Simon. So let's talk about you build it, you run it. This table shows the availability levels, the revenue loss per availability level and on-call per availability level at John Lewis and Partners. An operating model ensures your customer outcomes, and you build it, you run it is an insurance policy that can achieve high standards of deployment throughput and service reliability in a way that's cost effective. The way it works at John Lewis and Partners is a product manager has an idea for a new digital service, and they have to establish the maximum amount of revenue per hour that will flow through their digital service. And then there's a magic spreadsheet that a couple of us cooked up that uses these availability levels. So for example, if I have a cloud search service and I think that in less than 43 minutes, there could be over £500,000 flowing through it, then that would equate to an availability target of 99.9% and a team rota on call. If on the other hand, I've got a merchandising service and I think that there'll be £50,000 flowing through it between 1 and 7 hours as a duration, then I'd get an availability target of 99.0% and there'd be no on-call out of hours. We'll come back to that in a moment. But the key thing here really is that a product manager makes a decision, not Simon as the platform operations manager. The product manager does it because they're in charge of prioritization decisions. They're the budget holder for the service. So we try to push more responsibilities in their direction. Also, what we're looking to show here is that we can maximize operability incentives for the product teams so that they try to balance product features with operational features. This is a visualization of the incident notification workflow for both monoliths on premise and digital services hosted on the John Lewis and Partners digital platform. At the top, we have monolith alerts. So an alert is fired out of New Relic into an ops bridge team. That team is kind of surrounded by spreadsheets, and they look up an on-call rota spreadsheet. They find the right person in the application support team to call. Once they're contacted, they're invited into a Google chat room with their major incident manager, and the incident response begins. OpsBridge also manually create a ServiceNow ticket and keep that updated during the incident. It's very different with digital services. An alert comes out of Prometheus or New Relic and goes into PagerDuty. PagerDuty is automatically provisioned by JLDP. Teams, services, escalation policies, rotas, it all comes out of JLDP based on your availability level. So what happens then is PagerDuty matches the alert to a service, matches that to a team, matches that to a rota, and then calls the person on that rota that's up for on-call. So a product team engineer gets a phone call and they acknowledge it in Slack. A record in ServiceNow is automatically created, and there's bi-directional sync, so any updates to ServiceNow or PagerDuty are automatically reflected in both directions. An incident channel is created in Slack that's public and searchable. And the product team engineer is also given a big shiny button in PagerDuty that says declare a major incident. So if they want to, they can pull a major incident manager into the incident without having to know that person's phone number. So on reflection, adding PagerDuty into JLP Enterprise Service Management was a pretty big deal on our operability journey because it solved a bunch of problems in a pretty elegant way. Firstly, the time to acknowledge an incident came down from between 5 to 20 minutes to 60 seconds before a product team engineer knew what to do. And that's because the end-to-end workflow is entirely automated. Also, what else do I want to say here? It was also very easy for an application support team member to redirect a monolith alert into a more specific digital service alert. All they would have to do is to change the assignment group on the ServiceNow ticket, and PagerDuty would orchestrate all of the necessary work so that a product team engineer was told what to do. Painful friction points around ServiceNow setup, a personal favorite of mine, they were all taken away. And more importantly, a commitment to working with John Lewis and Partners IT as is was demonstrated, because no dual major incident management process was created. Major incident managers were invited into this new process as is. So one thing I'm often asked at Equal Experts is, how do major incident managers work in You Build It, You Run It? And my answer is exactly as before. That's how it happens at John Lewis. Okay, this is a visualization of out-of-hours support for John Lewis and Partners in, I think it was early 2020. And the y-axis is availability targets from low to high, and the x-axis is customer demand from low to high. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to achieve cost effectiveness at scale. We don't want to have 20 product teams, 20 digital services, 20 people on call. And at the same time, we don't want to have 20 teams, 20 services, 1 person on call. So we put a lot of careful thought into how to achieve the right balance that doesn't sacrifice operability incentives. So if your digital service has a low availability target, 95.0 or 99.0, what happens is there is no on-call out of hours. And I mean no on-call. There is no fallback to an operations team somewhere. And what this does is it actually incentivizes the product team to work hard on operability, even though they're not going to be called out of hours, because they're made aware that if there are any issues with their service, perhaps the appointment service or the loyalty service out of hours, then that incident will remain for them to resolve when they come in on the next working day. So what we've seen is that teams have strived to add in circuit breakers, add in more adaptive capacity, even though they might not be called out of hours. If your service has a middling availability target, then a product team member might be on call for that service on a given night, or someone from a sibling product team in the same product domain. So a product domain is a logical grouping of product services in the same, with a similar affinity. So for example, here we can see on this diagram that add to basket, electricals and fashion are all digital services underneath one commercial journeys domain rotor. And what that means is that even tonight, somebody is on call from those 3 teams for those 3 services. And then tomorrow it might be someone from one of the other sibling teams. So 3 services, 1 person on call. And finally, if a service has the highest availability level and the highest rate of customer demand, then there is a team rota. So that's the team on its own, entirely managing its own rota. And that's about really maximizing operability incentives. So as you can see here, that's only 3 services at this time for John Lewis and Partners. And too many services in this block suggests an overestimation of revenue impact on failure, or an underestimation of downstream dependencies, and mitigating any failures there. So a team rota isn't forever. What can happen is that product demand can slow down. And if that happens, then the digital service gracefully transitions back into its correct to product domain rota. All right, let's move on. So the second way that we considered operability was all about understanding concerns. And Simon was really keen on leading indicators as well as trailing indicators. This is about understanding which teams aren't putting adaptive capacity into their digital services before we have any actual incidents. And the way that we visualize this and manage this is with the JLDP service catalog. That's a bespoke service that runs on JLDP itself, and it's managed by the JLDP team. So the way it works is that there are automated checks and also exploratory questions about the operability of a particular service. So in this diagram, we can see a bunch of service levels for different services, and we can see their availability levels. And we can also see an assessments column and a telemetry column. So the telemetry column here, these are automated checks run by JLDP looking at the setup of a service. JLDP gives every digital service monitoring, logging, and alerting out of the box. But on top of that, if a service has bespoke telemetry, it's considered a leading indicator of operability. If there's no bespoke telemetry, that's considered a concern. And that's based on shared experiences at John Lewis and Partners, that teams that put the time into their own bespoke telemetry are better equipped to handle live incidents later on. And if we look at the assessments column here, this is all about open-ended exploratory questions. So every quarter, each team has to fill out a self-assessed service operability assessment. And that's a whole bunch of deep questions about a digital service. It's not a yes/no kind of format. That would be automated checks as with telemetry. It's much more about questions such as, what do you do if you have latency problems with a downstream dependency? And if a team reads this question and thinks that they need to add in a circuit breaker, that's stored as an answer, it's linked to a JIRA ID, and then that assessment is machine readable, so JLDP can read it in, and then the service catalog can show to Simon or to the team or to anyone at John Lewis and Partners that this particular service has an issue in the assessment space. So here we can see, I don't know, the top service there, there's a green on assessment and a red on telemetry. So they've done a recent assessment, there are no outstanding tasks, but they do have probably some missing bespoke telemetry. All right, now with trailing indicators, these are much more around service availability, deployment throughput, they're fully automated. This is looking at adaptive capacity that has been demonstrated rather than is lying in wait. And this screenshot is of deployment throughput. We have a fully automated check in JLDP of the frequency of deployments and how long it takes to do a deployment. So with this particular service, we can see the red line shows that deployment interval improved from fortnightly to weekly. We consider that a positive signal of operability because more frequent deployments are smaller deployments, and that means easier to roll back, easier to diagnose problems. Although there is some wobbliness here around the time to do a deployment, which is interesting. Leading indicators and trailing indicators, they're shallow data, they're not definitive. They're all considered to be placeholders for conversations. It's all about helping Simon and other folks understand which services might be sliding in the right or the wrong direction. Back to you, Simon.
Thank you very much. And we also want to test operability proficiency in different teams. So a part of doing this, we run chaos days and live load tests. So we want to identify services that may fail in production under certain circumstances before a major incident actually occurs. So this is a photo of a chaos day playback in our head office. You see speaking there is our platform product owner, Rob Hornby. And this particular chaos day was targeted at the platform itself in a test environment, with some team members acting as agents of chaos, which they really enjoyed that role. Product teams were asked to monitor their own services in that test environment and contact the platform team in their dedicated front door Slack channel if they saw any issues. So we run chaos days on a quarterly basis in a test environment, targeting our digital platform or one of the domain services. And we intentionally select the most experienced team members to be those agents of chaos. This is so we can ensure they can't act as human runbooks during the incident response, that they already know all the answers, and it gives experience to the rest of the team. And we've uncovered plenty of latent faults in the past, such as a product team who didn't even notice while their database had vanished. And the learnings from the chaos day and follow-up tasks are captured in another machine-readable repository, which gives us more governance data. And we've observed that teams who fix latent faults as soon as possible after a chaos day are generally less likely to endure painful incidents later on. We also regularly validate our ability to handle Black Friday levels of traffic. We have a similar approach to that of our chaos days. We visualize the key components of the website and use our knowledge and experience to determine what load scenarios to try. Although product teams do their own individual load testing per digital service, we still find it extremely useful to do simulations of full customer kind of browsing scenarios to understand the interactions between the different services and components. So at the moment, generally live load tests happen overnight to reduce the potential for customer impact. And we use real profiles of customer behavior, compressed and skewed to fit our Black Friday traffic profile. And then we inject that back into the website. And then product teams are asked to use that data to do analysis of their own services and to improve their own digital services, and obviously protect our stability over Black Friday. Another important thing for us is we take the professional development of our partners very seriously too. After all, they're co-owners in our business. And from the very outset on our digital journey, we've ensured that partners have opportunities to learn new skills and move into new roles. So partner engineers can embark on a number of different learning pathways. We've designed one specific to operability that covers topics such as agile operations, security testing, performance, learning from incidents, and much more. And as we mentioned before, the AppOps support team was mostly staffed by a third-party managed service with some partners. Well, those partners have invaluable skills and experience. And as we wind down that AppOps centralized support team and reduce the managed service, those partners are gradually moving into product teams or into the platform team themselves, and being able to bring that knowledge and share that, and are encouraged to share that with the rest of the team members. So I'll hand over to Steve now just to talk about some of the outcomes we've seen in 2020.
Thanks, Simon, and thanks already for the questions coming in. They're really good. I'm going to try not to answer them while I'm doing this. Okay, so in terms of outcomes, let's talk about throughput and reliability to begin with. So this is on deployment throughput, and the graph on the left shows monthly deployments per month for JLP digital services 2018 to 2020. And you'll see a significant uptake here. We've gone from 10 deploys a year to 5,000 a year. Most teams have gone from monthly to daily. You'll notice a bit of a decrease in deployments at Black Friday 2019. That's because digital services were still in the partnership-wide change management policy then for Black Friday. You'll see no such downtick in Black Friday 2020. And that's because by that point, stakeholder confidence had increased in digital services so that they were actually lift out of that process for good, which is awesome. The graph on the right is time to first customer. So here we've gone from months to reach a live customer to days. The time to provision a new digital service has come down from weeks to 1 day, I believe it is now. And obstacles continue to be removed out of this process. When digital teams now are able to get their services live much faster, some in only a day can reach live customers, or just a few days, then that's creating additional millions per year in incremental revenue, which is really encouraging. This is all about service reliability. So the graph on the left shows major incidents for monoliths and digital services on JLDP from 2018 to 2020, and you'll see no significant increase in incidents as we've introduced more digital services and introduced You Build It, You Run It. We've not gone above 4 in a month, I think, which is pretty good. And that was way back at the start of 2018. And the graph on the right shows time to restore for those exact same incidents. You should see from the dots in blue, that's the digital services, that the time to restore is substantially lower than that of monoliths. And you'll also see a trend downwards over the 2 years for both monoliths and digital services. That's really encouraging. It's an interesting correlation. There's certainly been a lot of knowledge sharing and cross-pollination of skills between digital services and the application support team. This is my favorite table ever. So this is a comparison of the operating models that comprise the hybrid operating model that John Lewis and Partners now uses. This is a comparison of You Build It, You Run It and the third-party managed service that supports the e-commerce monolith still. This is just for April 2019 to April 2020. So You Build It, You Run It was for 6 digital services with 4 rotors. So that obviously means that there's a product domain rotor there, or some services are out of on-call as it's not a linear growth. Deployments were daily, so 7 times faster than the managed service and the monoliths. There were half as many P1 or P2 incidents. The handoff rate, the amount of incidents that required to be handed over to a better place responder and incurring a time delay, that was 1.5 times lower. The average time to restore was 3 times faster. We saw that on the previous graph. Digital services blue dots were lower than the monoliths and the red dots. And the revenue protection effectiveness was 3 times higher. Now, this is a comparison of how much revenue is actually protected by each operating model. And the way that that works is that you look at the estimated revenue loss per incident for each operating model and then aggregate that together. And we can think of that in terms of a simple example. If you have a 99.9% availability target, we saw on the earlier table that that permits you 43 minutes of downtime. If you resolve an incident in 10 minutes rather than 43 minutes, that's going to give you a positive revenue protection effectiveness because you've saved yourself from 33 minutes of further revenue loss. Over to you, Simon.
Thank you. So what does this kind of speed and agility allow us to deliver for our customers? I've picked one example here, which was pre-COVID, but this was our first beta trial on johnlewis.com, where we wanted to improve the experience for choosing the right sofa. So for an online retailer, it's not often easy to gather feedback from your customers, but we've got the advantage of being able to tap into the vast experience of our shop selling partners. So after putting the first iteration live on the website, some of our team visited one of our shops to gather feedback. And now our shop floor partners are used to most kind of IT things taking multiple years to roll out new point of sale tills or a personnel system. So they were absolutely amazed that they took the feedback on the day and the live changes had been applied onto the website within the same day. So they were absolutely stunned by that. So hopefully our customers like that too. Although on the right, some of you may be aware that Boris is less happy with the John Lewis furniture, or maybe his other half. I'm sorry, we don't sell £800 gold wallpaper, but you know, you can't please everybody. So let's kind of come up to date now and look at maybe some of our current challenges. So, you know, we're still trying to achieve the best value support model. Steve talked about the domain rotors. Well, we've almost been too successful with getting teams want to build it and run it and own it. They're not keen to own other services within their domain because they say, well, you know, we know our service. We don't want anybody else to support our service. So that's still a bit more of a challenge and a cultural change to get people over some of the fears there. Also, we're looking at, you know, fully removing that safety net of a 24/7 managed service. As Steve talked about, if you do have people on call who will ultimately pick it up, then you become reliant upon that. And we need to wean ourselves off, you know, that kind of 24/7 eyes on. And evolving service management, we talked a little bit about how we work with that around incident management, but it's a journey that we're still on to get ITIL to become more agile, to understand that you don't have to have a 2-week you know, cab that you have to get everything approved, and it's an education for them. So we're still on that journey as well. So to kind of sum up, here's the takeaways. And how do you embed operability at scale in a 150-year-old company? Well, I think Steve and I would say, you know, test and learn and continually evolve your operating model. It will be different for every organization, but that's a good way to progress. Think about operability as early as possible to ensure you've got that sustainability, that you don't get overwhelmed by operability issues. Maintain the visibility of those operability issues, both with leading and trailing indicators to keep you on track. Encourage where you can, little and often deployments wherever possible. That increases your agility and reduces the blast radius of any deployment issues or defects. And adopt, you build it, you run it for all your product teams to maximize those operability incentives and keep and create a cost-effective insurance for business outcomes. So that leads us to the end. I will say thank you for those that have been listening and enduring me rambling on. Hope you've enjoyed it. I will just draw your attention here to the top thing. We're always recruiting partner engineer we're looking for at the moment. We'd love you to join the team. And there's a number of other links to talks by other partners and articles from John Lewis and EE. So
I'd also reiterate what Simon said. I'd say thank you to everyone. And I'd also say that John Lewis and Partners is a great place to be.
Thank you.
I would agree. And I really enjoyed learning about the history of the journey you've been on, having only started working with you guys in 2020. It was good to hear about the 2017, 2018, 2019, what all the work you did before some of us got here. And it's really exciting to work in a place where people like Simon embrace you build it, you run it. And this whole presentation was about, you know, how I live my day, Monday to Friday. So there's loads of questions. So thank you for this. You can either stop sharing your screen or you can leave it up there for the link on the job. Up to you. So we've got lots of good questions. I'll just start with the top one here. So the question that was received before the talk is, was there any resistance or reluctance from the operations teams when you started to adopt you build it, you run it? And did the developers object?
Well, I guess I'll take that one. Well, I was representing operations, so I probably had some resistance to start with, and Steve and I, you know, had a lot of debates, and I guess I was echoing the previous fears of kind of the delivery teams running operations, and would they care about it? Would they do that professionally? But I think we've talked through all the things as to how we, you know, I got convinced, I got comfortable with it, and how my team and our operations all got comfortable with it. So I think, you know, it's definitely a cultural shift, but I think if you can prove it, you embed it and you see it work and you build from that, then everybody buys into it. And from a delivery team point of view, that was a different challenge, because it started with them not wanting to be on call. You know, we don't want to do that. And I ended up in weekly meetings with the initial kind of cloud team, talking about their kind of fears and what their worries were, and, you know, did they really need to be on call? But you know, we've come full kind of circle with that from them saying, you know, when we wanted to draw it out into a domain rota, they were going, but no, we care about our service. This is our service. We want to run it. So it's just, it was really nice to kind of hear that, because that was really successful.
If I can just add a little bit to that, I think when we look back at the start of it, Simon's downplaying his role a little bit. I think that a big difference with John Lewis and Partners is that they had tried cross-functional teams back in the day, long before I ever turned up. So when Simon and I sat down to talk about how this might work, it was a really nuanced conversation. There was no Kool-Aid or rebuttal of Kool-Aid. It was very much, we have these current problems. There's a solution that's widely understood, but we believe from the past we'd had these extra problems core. So how do we counteract those? So looking at things like different levels of on-call to achieve cost effectiveness at scale, that kind of stuff all came out of Simon's original vision for making sure we had something that was pragmatic and practical. And it's worked out pretty well, I think.
Definitely. I can say as someone who works in that environment, it's fantastic. There's a couple questions that are tied for first place. I'm going to go with one that's about leading indicators. So Zoe says, in the identify concerns with leading indicator slide, what do the symbols mean under assessments? Green is good, gray is warning, red is bad. What do the numbers mean in telemetry?
Yeah, I can tell that one. Thank you, Erin. So Craig Lynch has also asked a similar question. Thank you. So I take this as feedback that screenshot isn't great and it needs a bit more explanation around it. So green is good, red is bad, gray means don't know. And what it's really about is with telemetry, it's much easier because it's automated check. So it's either green or red, it's either yes or no. With exploratory, gray means you haven't done an assessment recently. Green is you've done an assessment and all questions have been answered and all tasks have been completed. Red means you've done an assessment recently, some questions have been answered and tasks completed. There are some tasks outstanding. Craig says, is there a set expectation of how many bespoke indicators a team should have? No, I mean, from my time at John Lewis Partners, when I left last summer, it was pretty much, if everything's 0 and green, then it's really good. But there's no gating here, right? The JLDP team doesn't have like a set level where you're allowed to deploy. It's much more for the team to reflect themselves and what they're comfortable with. And Simon and other folks can sometimes look at services, sort the services, see which ones have the highest number of red or the highest number of green, and then have some conversations with those teams. It's something that has been iterated on a lot, and I'm sure it's continued to improve since my departure last summer.
Yeah,
Simon, would you like to add anything there?
No, I think you pretty much covered it. There is no set number for that, and red just highlights it and says, let's have a conversation about it. Is there something of concern or not? And sometimes there isn't.
On the receiving end of those assessments, as I've done quite a few with my team, they do prompt us to say, should we have one? What should we be looking out for? So they're really valuable, and we do them ourselves.
So it's worth saying that process is based on something Equal Experts did previously at HMRC that I worked on there. And the John Lewis and Partners version is far more refined in that there are no yes, no questions whatsoever. Every question starts with how, and that's a deliberate choice. It's almost like the analogy between automated testing and exploratory testing. We want to encourage folks to think really deeply about their service for themselves. And self-assessment is the only way that it can happen at scale.
I mean, I thought what was really interesting is you kind of don't realize what's in your heads and you're keeping it to yourself. So from an operations point of view, we were never sharing this. We never documented our knowledge and experience from all the incidents, all the indicators that said, look, service is going to fail. And what Steve and the team kind of did was extract from us, how do you turn this into a form to be able to prompt everybody to think about it, learn from that experience that's kind of all locked in our heads. So it really surfaced it, and it was a good way of doing that.
Right, I'll move on to another question here. It's Arthur P, and he's asking, do you do any security related chaos engineering?
So we haven't yet, but I guess it depends on what your definitions of chaos engineering. We do pen tests. You could argue that is a form of chaos engineering. Our security team do kind of red team kind of initiatives, and they focus on different areas and do that. We kind of don't term that as a particular chaos Chaos Day or whatever, but I think a number of activities are probably not too dissimilar.
Yeah. So Arthur, thank you for the question. You asked a previous question about chaos engineering that I answered online, and I gave you some links to some recent John Lewis and Partners blogs on the topic. There's also an Equal Experts playbook on chaos days. The link to that was at the end of the presentation, equalexperts.com/playbooks. The capability is there. One other thing that's happened in the last few months, I believe, is governance as code is now being introduced with Open Policy Agent running on JLDP. So that's another way of baking security into the delivery process.
Thank you. So we've got a question about asking more on the model of collaboration between platform team and product team. How do product teams engage platform team in the process, of developing the new service?
Yeah, so I'll answer that one first. So it's all about bi-directional feedback. So this is a really important principle of digital platforms. It's not just with the John Lewis digital platform, but also with HMRC and other Equal Experts clients. We have a digital platform playbook at equalexperts.com/playbooks that talks about how those bi-directional feedback loops are formed. But there's very much the platform team participate in understanding what a product team digital service will look like. There are 2 kickoff meetings for a new digital service. One of them is a what conversation about what the availability level might be, what the revenue levels might be. And then there's a secondary how conversation that's much more about the architecture of the service and if any new platform capabilities are required. Simon, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because when we're coming up with a new service, it might need a new platform service. So quite often, new team that's doing a new area will build something, and then we'll fold that back in to the platform as a service that's useful for other teams. Also worth kind of mentioning, I kind of touched on it. We've got a Slack channel, which is our kind of front door, as we call it, process to get support from the platform team. So any of the product teams can kind of ask questions, ask for support, say, well, I've looked at your documentation here. What does that mean? We're trying to use it in a different way. And it's very collaborative there, but we have a kind of a documented process to engage with teams.
Yeah, you've just reminded me, Simon, there's also a way to add the JLDP team onto your live incident in PagerDuty. You just add another team into the incident. It's synced back to ServiceNow and also initiates a call out to the JLDP team member on call. That's happened a couple of times before.
I'm going to note that one down. I didn't realize that.
It should be in the onboarding guide.
I must have missed that sentence. This is an interesting question. It says, awesome that you track mean revenue loss per incident. Can you talk more about the measurements? Do you track things like average customer impact duration, variance in response time, mean time to enable fallbacks gracefully?
Wow, that is a really good question.
I'll kind of start on it. I think, it's a really good question. I think you picked a number of things that we probably don't go to that level. I guess every incident, as anybody will know, is quite different, and the impact on customer can be quite different. So I guess for each individual impact, we'll look at what that kind of impact was. Some are really clear when you have an issue in checkout of what the revenue impact was, how quickly could we kind of restore that service. We've got a number of, I don't think we really talked about, Erin would know about this. We've got a number of circuit breakers in our services where we kind of fall back and degrade as gracefully as possible. Do we track how quickly that works? Well, actually, most of those circuit breakers are automated. So I don't know, Erin, whether you want to comment for your kind of area.
Yes, we do use that sort of thing, and we set them up so that the customer can still go about their business and buy something from John Lewis. And we have ways of reporting on how long that it takes for that to kick in and how long the customer is going through that experience rather than the original experience. But I mean, we would play that back to you, Simon. You would be the consumer of that information.
Yeah, and it would be recorded in the post-incident review report, right? Which again is machine readable,
Yes.
and any outstanding tasks are reflected back in the service catalog.
Yeah, and I guess it's worth talking about that. That you know, we have that post-incident review process, as I'm sure many do, but it's important for the product team or whichever service had the particular issue and any interdependent services to get together and discuss what happened. So we kind of capture the timeline. You know, when was the first alert triggered? You question yourself and go, well, did we spot that early enough? Was there an alert that could have warned us earlier in there, as the issue was emerging before it became a major issue? As you kind of indicated there, did it drop back to another kind of level of service, degraded service, but actually the impact was much less? And we look through that whole timeline and then say, you know, how can we improve collectively? And it is really, you know, it's the blameless post-mortem. You know, some other kind of third parties that I work with, I'm kind of horrified when I hear, you know, you cause a major incident, you're sacked. It's like that is just absolutely against the principles we're talking about. I would rather learn about you know, not enough fault tolerance in a service through, you know, chaos days or live load testing than in an incident. But if we do have an incident, we need to learn as much as possible and all agree what we can do to make that better, and that's what the focus is.
Agree. The last incident I was involved in, I was thanked for how well we did our post-incident review and how well we responded, which is exactly what you need to hear after you've been through that. Okay, here's a question about change control. How did you convince change control to accept the move to such a rapid delivery cadence?
This is definitely one for me. Given that I introduced ITIL in the partnership and service now some years ago, I think, you know, people will probably say you're turning your back on ITIL, but I don't see it that way. I see this as an evolution, and when change management processes were put in place, where you had on-premise kind of infrastructure changes that could, you know, affect multiple services. When you had big releases, then you did need to sort of tell everybody and govern through that kind of process. So I guess we're evolving and adapting, and we're still on that journey. But you know, what we've recently done is sat down with the change management team in this instance and said, this is how we work, and explain to them, you know, all the points we just talked about. We've got automated deployments. It's not manual. We have 5,000 deployments a year. Going through a process that says you have to raise a change 2 weeks and then it goes through a change advisory board, well, it doesn't work, does it? And actually, when you play that back to them, you say it doesn't add value. You know, the change advisory board or other teams, that the people that are best placed to assess their own risk are the product teams themselves. And we've had to kind of back off from that as an ops team as well and say, look, we can't keep up with that scale of looking at every deployment when you've got 5,000 a year and assessing it and adding any value. And yeah, no, B, we really not adding value in that process. So it's been explaining to the change management team that we were able to demonstrate, you know, change success rate, change failure rate. We can, you know, show them that how we're kind of not just assessing risk, but minimizing risk in automated testing and everything else we do, how quickly we can kind of roll back. So really, we uncovered what are the core aspects that you're trying to achieve in change management and demonstrate we can do that actually better in a different way, in an automated way. And at the moment, we're just automating the raising of change records. So every deployment will automatically raise a ServiceNow change record. So everybody's got visibility, a bit like Steve said earlier. The wider enterprise, we're not breaking that process. We're doing it and achieving it in a different way.
I'd agree with all of that. And also, is that the Steve Boyd from My Days at Sky? That's amazing if it is.
I hope so.
I mean, I would just say the most important thing to do around change control is to be friends with the change manager and to understand their pain and have empathy for them. Something that I personally always try to do. And the change manager at John Lewis is lovely.
There's a question about agile ways of working from Jeff. Were agile ways of working such as Scrum or Kanban important prerequisites for the DevOps journey? And if so, were these fully embedded beforehand?
Yes and yes. That's an easy one. They are prerequisites. And before the big push on operability, before you build it, you run it, teams already had developers, testers, product managers, delivery leads, all working in teams hand in hand. It definitely smoothed the pathway to what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't touch it in this part of the journey, but I absolutely agree. We actually started with that, really. That was one of the early things and made it absolutely critical.
Okay. How did technical employees, devs, testers, QA, react to changes in their work-life balance, like adding the on-call? Does everyone have to take part in on-call? Would anyone resign because of it?
No, not everyone has to take part. That's not the John Lewis and Partners way, and it's not the Equal Experts way. It's for everyone to choose for themselves. Each product team, you look for a minimum of 3 to 4 people in a rota. And obviously some folks might not be able to take part in on-call for family reasons, or I don't know, for any other kind of personal reason. That's not a problem that's unique to developers. That's something that operations teams have dealt with for many, many years. And it's really about negotiation and working together as a team and understanding what's best for everyone. I think most teams aim for folks to do a week of on-call a month as a rough guideline, but again, that varies between teams.
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge for everybody, and Steve kind of touched on it. Operations people have lives as well. you know, you kind of expect everybody to be on call all the time. So it is really just making sure that we respect everybody's particular circumstances, which change over the months and years. But as a team, you need to be able to come up with a viable support rota. So if that means we need to move people around to make sure you can do that, then that's what we'll do.
And in the team that I've had where we had a rota, we had around that number of people that Steve recommends for on the rota. They did it one evening and just rotated every day. And there was definitely one person in the team who wanted to be part of that, but felt that they might need help at times. And so within that team, we set up an emergency phone a friend WhatsApp channel as a back channel to say, I'm working on this, but I could use some input. So we welcomed any of the disciplines in the team onto the rota. There's another question about security. I'm not sure if this was covered by the previous one. I was just wondering how your info security function fits into this DevOps delivery style.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly something we spent a lot of time on. Would I say we're perfect yet? The security team are generally quite separate, but we work really closely with the security manager InfoSec to be able to lessen the impact of having to do pen tests and try and embed it. So what we have actually, we have somebody from Equal Experts who's the security lead, who's in the digital platform team. So they're in our team, and they are all looking at focused on how do we get the tooling in that CI/CD pipeline. How do we automate as much as possible? You can't do everything, but you can do quite a lot of it. So we actually have brought security into our team, into our platform team. To be honest, the security manager was very supportive of that, because he's going, you know what, I don't have that knowledge in my team, that level of engineering and the security that you kind of require. It's no good us coming up with policies that really don't fit your environment. So, we give you ownership to go and solve that problem.
Great answer. Steve, did you want to add anything?
No, not at all. As normal, I agree with Simon.
We're almost out of time, but there's one last question, which I think is familiar to many of us who've worked with John Lewis. asking for a friend. Can we get a John Lewis discount?
No, sorry.
You have to.
I'm sure you would all like to share in that. But yes, I really enjoy my 25% discount. And, you know, I would just encourage you to be partners. As I said,
Yep.
you know,
JLPjobs.com. My sister-in-law often asks me, and I've said before, if you want 15% off at Waitrose and 25% off at John Lewis, you need to join John Lewis and stop asking me.
Absolutely.
I'm hoping to get my son a job at Waitrose.
Is he going to have any say in that?
No.
Brilliant way of achieving it, because then for the family you can get your discount. I know others that have done the same.
That's my route in.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you, Steve and Simon, for a great talk. Really thank you for the hour you spent with us and for all the great questions for everyone who attended. We do want to invite you to the next Expert Talk Online. It's on the 12th of May, the same time, 6 p.m. British summertime. It will be the first in a series of 3 talks about data. It's going to be called Applying AI, How to Get the Best from Your Data, and the speaker will be Simon Case, who leads the data practice at Equal Experts. All the details and the links to our talks are on the Equal Experts website under the Expert Talks Online tab. Take a look, register, and we hope to see you at one of these in the future. Thank you, everyone, for attending tonight. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Simon, for everything at John Lewis. You ran it. Okay, good night, folks.